Welcome, welcome to Way to Be. This is where we are going to chat about how awesome health professions, partnerships, and practices are today. I'm Rachel Glade, and this is...
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rosenzweig.
And we both have experience working with individuals with hearing loss. Today, we are discussing all things about auditory verbal therapy and a dual perspective of being both an auditory verbal therapist, a listening and spoken language specialist, as well as a parent. So with all that considered, now let's welcome Dr. Dorie Noll to the stage. So welcome, Dorie. We are happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. So we're just going to start with some informal questions. So how about first, maybe tell us a little bit about your personal journey and how you came into the profession.
Okay. So as you said, I am the parent of a now young adult who is profoundly deaf and uses a cochlear implant. So I entered this world as a mom and I knew nothing about any of that. My son was actually born before newborn hearing screening, so he was not diagnosed until 13 months. And we just sort of immersed ourselves into this world and had to make those decisions really quickly of like, what communication modality do you want? Cochlear implant versus no cochlear implant. And so it was a bit of a whirlwind in the beginning. But my husband and I our coping strategy was to gather information and learn as much as we could. And so we literally just read everything we could get our hands on, talked to professionals, and did as much as we could to make the best choices that we could make for our family. So my son was then implanted at 2.5. He's 26 now. So I'll preface that by saying this was pretty early back then. So I think the earliest they were doing cochlear implants was age 2, and we were moving. And so it ended up at 2.5. And then sort of the real work began, and we had to do really intensive habilitation so that he could learn to listen and talk. And he went to, at that time, we lived in the DC area. My husband was in the Army, and he started at the River School in Washington, DC. And I was driving him. We lived pretty far out in the suburbs, and I was driving him like an hour and 20 minutes one way to school. So I started volunteering at the school because I would get myself in trouble if I went shopping every day while he was at school. So I volunteered at the school, and then they asked me to cover a maternity leave for the receptionist who was having a baby. So I ended up employed at the River School. And that was really a turning point for me because then I got to go to all the professional development activities that they had. And I got to really know at the River School, it was mostly speech pathologists doing this work. And so a lot about what they do and how they do it and how they assess children and all of that. And I was just sort of soaking it all in and learning as much as I could. And it was the people that I connected with there that really encouraged me to change career paths and move into this field. And so when my son was 5, I decided to start a master's program. And by that time, we had moved to St. Louis. So I did the master's program in audiology and communication sciences at Washington University in deaf education. And so I did that, and I then became an early intervention provider at Central Institute for the Deaf in St. Louis. I knew from the very beginning of deciding that this was the field I wanted to go into, that I wanted to do early intervention, because that was really, really impactful for our family. I mean, all of the professionals that we worked with over the years were wonderful, but early intervention was the biggest impact, and I wanted to pay it forward and impact other families. And, I had that sort of perspective of, I know what it's like to be told your child is, there's something wrong. So, while every family situation is unique, I had that sort of innate empathy that I knew would serve families well. So I was an early interventionist at CID for around 10 years. I also taught in the toddler classroom there. During that time, I pursued my listening and spoken language specialization. So I'm an auditory verbal educator. And then we had the opportunity to, my husband had the opportunity to take a job in Canada. So we were there for 4 years, and I had been kind of thinking about pursuing my PhD, but it was a little trickier when we were in St. Louis because it would have required me to quit my job and do a program full time. And that just wasn't really feasible with 2 young kids at home and all of that. So when we moved to Canada, I took that opportunity to start a PhD program. And so I completed my PhD at the University of Ottawa in rehabilitation sciences. And then we moved back to St. Louis, and I got a position at Fontbonne University as an assistant professor, and started training professionals to do this work, which kind of felt full circle to me. Now I have transitioned to a position at Utah State University's Department of Communicative Disorders and Deaf Education, doing a similar role.
Wow. So what was your original career path?
My undergrad was in sociology. And I did a job I was like a counselor at a drug treatment facility before I had babies for just a couple of years. And it was not the best fit for me. And I also sort of look back and think, who thought it was a good idea to get an undergrad in sociology? Like, what can you do with that? So I kind of didn't have a great idea of my career path at that time. I did always kind of think I would come back around to being a teacher. That was something that I always felt like I wanted to do when I was growing up. And then I sort of changed my mind when I was in undergrad and thought, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm so interested in psychology and sociology. So I probably should have done teaching. So I kind of came back around to my natural skill in teaching. So.
Wow. Well, lucky for us that it happened that way. Lucky for the field. So you talked about your current roles, both at Fontbonne and then at Utah State, working with students who are studying to become teachers of the deaf, speech language pathologists. Tell us a little bit more about that role and what you like about it.
I love the teacher. I love the mentoring piece of it. I really love working with students who are really eager to learn. And I just love fostering sort of that lifelong learning growth mindset, because I think, it's so important in this field to continue growing and learning. And so actually for myself, it has allowed me to continue growing and learning. And I just love seeing that progression and sort of the aha moments that the students have when they're like, oh, now I understand. And I love teaching courses. Sort of my favorite is the family-centered early intervention courses. That clearly that's my area of expertise. So I love teaching about, caregiver coaching and coaching families and working with families in kind of a different way than you would if you were doing direct intervention with a child. So that's just a fun thing for me, because I have lots of stories and lots of insight to share, both as a mom and as a practitioner for many years. So those are that's kind of what I love about this work.
Yeah. So you mentioned mentorship, and right now you're in the role of kind of getting to be the mentor. But I would imagine that along your journey, you've probably had some stellar mentors on your journey. Would you speak to maybe, if you want to give some shout outs, you can, but also just, what is that role of, being the mentee been? Because I know in working with students, sometimes it's a little bit scary to reach out and maybe seek a mentor. So can you speak to that a bit?
Yes. I have been really, really fortunate to have some really wonderful mentors, but not only that they were good at mentoring, but they also were really good at being a cheerleader and believing in me when I was not so sure of myself. And so it kind of started, I guess, at the River School when I had all of the SLPs that were encouraging me to kind of pursue this role. And they believed that I had something to offer. So it sort of started there. And then when I started working at CID, Chris Clark was my direct supervisor, and she's this warm and encouraging and of course you can do it kind of person. So that was a big impact in my early career. And then Dr. Jenna Voss was my Lissel's mentor. And of course she is wonderful. And she was also my department chair at Fontbonne. So she kind of continued in that role of just being a wonderful coach and mentor. And then I was also extremely fortunate during my PhD to work with Dr. Elizabeth Fitzpatrick, who is also an incredible mentor. And I have heard lots of stories of challenges during PhD programs of having supervisors that were not as encouraging or supportive. And Elizabeth was just wonderful in letting me make my own decisions, but giving me the skills and the confidence to make those decisions. And she continues to be a wonderful mentor.
That's really powerful.
So I was just going to say, as you were saying that, it makes me think, man, maybe we should start like a way to be list, like a way to be Chris Clark and way to be Jenna Voss and, way to be Elizabeth Fitzpatrick. I mean, because how crucial is that to have people that are championing other people in the field? I mean, I know it was critical for me, and then to hear you light up talking about them, it's just awesome. So I don't know. We got to think about that, because it's just so awesome to have those types of people in the field.
Rachel going to her next project.
Yes. And all of those people knew how to give feedback that's constructive. And, I just remember my very first student teaching rotation. I was with someone who hadn't had a student teacher before. And all of the feedback I got was, you did a great job. That was awesome. And I was thinking, I am brand new at this and I'm not even finished with my grad program. There has to be a way I can be better than what I'm doing now. And it wasn't super helpful. She was very kind, but I didn't grow in that placement. And so all of the people that I mentioned, Chris Clark, Jenna Voss, and Elizabeth Fitzpatrick, have this skill of giving really great, specific, and constructive feedback, but at the same time, demonstrating that they believed that I could do it. So I think that's just a skill set that not everyone has. And I've been really fortunate to have some wonderful mentors.
Something else you said about mentoring that really stood out to me was you said, they let me make my own decisions, but they gave me the skills to make those decisions and do that well. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really, really powerful. So what would your top tips be? Now you are in the mentor role. What tips would you have for new professionals, whether they're students or just starting out, or maybe even people who have been SLPs or teachers for a long time, but are just getting into this field of listening and spoken language?
I think my top tip probably is to continue learning and growing every day. I think, some students come out and they're like, I am so confident in my skills and I know what this family needs to do or this child needs to do. And I know what skills should be developed next. And that's sort of skewed to one side of like, I know it all and I don't need to continue learning. And then there are others who feel like I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know what to do. And I think that's the opposite. And I think the sort of nice middle ground is for students to understand that they don't know everything, but they need to continue growing and to connect with people that can help them to continue to grow. I think that's a really important piece, to just have that mindset of I want to continue growing and learning as I am doing this work, even though I'm confident in the skills that I have and that I've learned. I think a big learning curve for me as being a parent first, my first year in this work, especially working in early intervention, it was a challenge for me to set aside, to, I guess, draw from my own experiences, to be compassionate and empathetic with families, but sort of set aside my own experiences to understand that like what I went through is not the same as what this family went through. Their resources may not be the same as mine, their perspectives, their background, all of these variables. No two parents experience this in the same way. And so I had to be really intentional. And I guess my tip would be to be really intentional to identify implicit or explicit biases, but also just really reflect on where am I bringing myself too much into this, where it can come across as being judgmental to a family of like, well, I did it. Why can't you do it? I fought my 2-year-old with the hearing aids. Why can't you put the hearing aids on your kid? And I was never that judgmental, but there's these little sort of things that can creep in. And so in my first year, that was actually a really valuable thing that Chris Clark was just wonderful at being someone I could reflect with, and I could say the things that I was thinking and recognize that, ooh, wow, that really is a judgmental thing that I'm thinking of this family. I need to think about how I can shift my perspective and better support this family where they are. So I think really being reflective and understanding that we all come in with biases. We all have backgrounds. We all have a history that we're drawing from, but to know that families and even students, if you're working with older kids, have their own experiences. And so we need to recognize and move forward, meeting people where they are. I think that's really important. And I think the other thing that was really important for me was collaborating with other professionals. And I think I tell students often that, if you happen to be, the one itinerant teacher in a rural community and you are the one and only teacher of the deaf in the community, find your people. So it might be your cohort that you graduated with. It might be, an online professional community. There are lots of them out there, but you don't have to do and really shouldn't do this work on your own, because you can learn from others, you can reflect with others, and it just feels way less isolating if you have other people that they're going through similar challenges and experiences, and you can cheer each other on. So I think finding a community of people that you can collaborate with is a really important part of this work.
Well, you mentioned, we've talked about, again, kind of mentor versus mentee, and you just shared some tips for maybe the mentee portion. I wonder, given your experience, in both roles, would you have tips for mentors, like people, maybe some folks that have been in the profession a little longer that are currently in mentor roles? What tips might you have for them?
Well, I think, like I said, the mentors that have been in my life have kind of helped me self-reflect and helped me make my own decisions rather than telling me this is what you should do. And kind of knowing how to give feedback in a way that's like, consider how you might have approached this differently, or asking those sort of open-ended questions of, why do you think this mom responded in this way to something that you said? And maybe guiding in a way that where, it's clear to me that maybe this student said something that came across as really maybe harsh or judgmental, but sort of guiding them to that. So asking those reflective questions and open-ended questions, and being willing to have I think it's a partnership. I think I learn from every student that I mentor, and they learn from me as well. So what I don't want to do is come in and just be, well, I know how to do this. You need to listen to me, and this is what you should do next. I've always had mentors in my life that have believed in me and valued my input. And that's what I try to do as a mentor for students as well.
I love that consider phrase, right?
Yes.
So Dorie, could you share some proud moments, both from your career and from raising a child with hearing loss?
Yes. I think really impactful moments. I was kind of thinking about preparing for this, like things that have really impacted me in my professional role. And I think the one that stands out absolutely above the rest is I have volunteered with the Global Foundation for Children with Hearing Loss in both Vietnam and Mongolia. And my very first experience with them was in Vietnam. And this kind of speaks to both, actually, because that experience in itself was incredible. And it was a big eye-opener for me because, I remember the first week we did a 2-week training programs for local professionals and teaching them how to better serve kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. But we had a parent night. And in that first week, and these parents parents drove from hours and hours, and we had so many parents that showed up, and they were just so hungry for that support, but also for information from us as professionals. And I had one mom that stood up, and I will just never forget that she was so emotional, and she had gotten hearing aids for her child, and they weren't powerful enough. And she was then being told, you either need more powerful hearing aids or consider a cochlear implant. And she was really struggling with that. And basically, she told this story of how they mortgaged their home to be able to buy hearing aids for their child, only to be told that they weren't good enough. And she was just overcome with emotion of like, how do I help my child? I know he needs more, but I don't know how to give him more. And I don't have the resources to give him more. And that just, I mean, I remember leaving that meeting and immediately calling my husband going, how can we help this mom? Like, we've got to help this mom. And I know that, we can't help everyone. We can't save everyone. But I think when I reflected on that, it just made me feel so fortunate that my child was born in a place that resources are available and that lots of resources are available, but we also have good insurance, and we were able to move to get him, when we moved to the St. Louis area, we chose an area where we knew we could drive to the school that he needed to go to. And we had choices because we had resources available to us. And so I was like, thank goodness he was born in a part of the world that we had that, but I will never take advantage. I mean, I will never take that for granted again. I think that was really impactful to me to recognize that not everyone has the resources or the expertise, and they just happen to live in Vietnam or Mongolia or wherever it is. That has kind of led me to I've again volunteered with Global Foundation multiple times, and I just joined the Global Matters Committee with AG Bell, and I'm very passionate about helping to spread the expertise. But that was just really impactful for me, and really changed how I view what I came back and did with families. Trying to help them recognize that, like, you have these resources. Let's figure out how you can tap into them. Let me help you. I know that you can do what your child needs, and here are the resources, and I'll guide you through that. I think proud mom moments are many. My son is very successful. He, again, sort of started late. So wasn't diagnosed until 13 months, wasn't implanted until 2.5. And so we had a lot of catching up to do. I remember when my daughter was born, my son was 5, and he only knew one song. No, I take that back. He knew 2 songs. That's it. He knew Happy Birthday, and he knew Shoe Fly. That shoe fly, don't bother me. And so he knew after she was born, on the day that she was born, he sang happy birthday to her, but then he knew it wasn't her birthday anymore. So he only ever sang that song to her. And it was like an eye opener to me of like, wow, he's 5 and he doesn't know any of the nursery rhymes and the songs that he should know. So if that tells you anything, at 5, he was still really catching up on language. But he just excelled in school. When he learned to read, it was like a whole world was opened up to him. And, I knew there were phrases that he learned through reading. And we would just laugh because he would come in and tell on his sister, and he would say, she's peering around the corner at me. And I'm like, you read that. And he would mispronounce words because he had read them, but didn't know it was the same word that he had heard, like the word guide. We went on a hike and he was like, look, Dad, it's the trail goody. And I was like, oh, he didn't connect that's when I said, oh, you mean guide? He was like, oh. But then he went on to, he mainstreamed in the 1st grade, and he finished high school as his class valedictorian. He got a full scholarship to Ole Miss and got a chemical engineering degree from Ole Miss and graduated with honors, and now has a wonderful job and a beautiful wife, and he is doing great in his life. And I just think back to how hard he had to work and how much we tried to support. But then there were also times when we were like, is this really going to be, how is he going to be successful? Is he ever going to know more than 2 songs to sing to his sister? So I'm just so proud of the man that he's become and all of the work that he's put into being a very successful contributing member of society, I guess.
Wow. And your daughter's very musical. So who knows, maybe
Yes.
the 2 songs really, that was all it took.
Maybe that's what it was. Yes.
I'm not sure I could count how many times your past couple of answers have like given me goosebumps. Like it's just so great to hear the positive, the positive stories. It's so awesome. So one thing, I'm so glad you brought up the Global Foundation for Hearing Loss. I was actually going to ask you a question about that anyway, but since we've touched on that, I was wondering if you could, because you shared on, proud mom moments, but maybe some, it's because you mentioned, kind of going through the school system and you've gone on that journey. I wonder if you might have any tips for parents, maybe of kids with hearing loss or even kids with communication disorders, on working with the professionals through that school system.
Yes. I don't want to imply that our journey was always smooth or easy, and we had our share of battles that we had to overcome in order to get the services that our son needed. And I think learning how to be an advocate, and I think there's a fine line between gathering lots of information and coming in with knowledge, but not coming in ready to fight. So it's sort of that fine line between arming yourself with information and knowledge and knowing that you know your child best and that you have a right to choose, communication methodology, access to educational resources, those kinds of things. And then walking that line of, well, I need to collaborate with these people because they are the people who are meeting those needs, that are providing those services for my son. So we had a big battle when he turned 3 with a school district that thought it would be appropriate for him to be in a classroom with ages 3 to 5 with all communication modalities. And he, like I said, had just been implanted and really needed specialized listening and spoken language input because that was the choice that we made as a family. And it was a horrible experience because, they were basically saying, this is where your child needs to be. You're depriving him of language by not allowing him to sign. We got those messages. And we as parents had to say, we understand that we have a choice in this, that this is what we want for our child. So, we are choosing to push back. And we were fortunate that we had a school available to us that we were able to take him to and not put him in the school district. But then after that, when he mainstreamed into our public school system, when he was first grade, I sort of had that experience in my mind. And I went in with a totally different mindset of like, I need to collaborate. This is the district we want him to go to school in. This is our home. This is our community. I want to come in with information and knowledge. But I also want to be amenable to what they have to say, I guess, as well. And we were actually really fortunate that we had a district that was wonderful and they kind of bent over backwards for us. But I think advocating is a really important part, but also being willing to work with the people that are going to provide services to your child is a important skill. And it is hard because it is such an emotional thing. And you go in and you are defensive and you are, it's a very emotional thing to make sure that, well, my child needs these services and you can't tell me he doesn't qualify for summer services because he isn't delayed enough. That was not the approach that was going to get me the quality of services that I felt that he needed. And so I kind of learned that lesson a little bit the hard way. And then was able to figure out a way to communicate what my desires were a little bit less emotionally. And I was heard better when I didn't come in and have all of this, I don't know, emotion clouding my willingness to collaborate, I guess.
Awesome. Well, one more question, and then we'll get to our rapid round for the end of our time here. But so I feel like we've talked about the early intervention. We talked about the school age piece. My guess is that as time progressed, perhaps your son had to take a bit more of the role. So I'm interested, what did that transition or those transition periods look like for like high school and then college and so on, like that kind of next steps? What were your proud moments, or what might you recommend for parents or professionals in those transition periods as well?
That was a little bit of a challenge because when it came time for our son to start like participating in his IEP meetings, the very last thing that he wanted to do was draw attention to himself in middle school as, any different from anybody else. And so we had to sort of balance that as a parent of like, well, this is this is who you are, and these are the things that you need, and you need to learn how to ask for those. And so we really had to kind of coach and guide him. And that was a pretty big struggle, like all the way through like middle school and high school. But there was just something that kind of clicked for him in high school, that he just learned that this is something about myself, that there's nothing wrong. I've learned a lot. I have a lot of characteristics that I've developed because of my deafness. And I guess a proud mom moment is when he did his like college scholarship applications, he wrote about that. And it was a big shift in his thinking. And the other thing that he decided to do was, he is an Eagle Scout. And when he did his Eagle Scout project, he wanted to do something to serve people with disabilities. So he built like a picnic table that was handicap accessible and like poured a ramp and the whole thing. And it was kind of during that time in his like junior and senior year of high school that he started to sort of understand his identity and sort of take ownership of that. And so then when he went to college, he really, I mean, we gave him guidance, but he was the one that sort of took the reins and said, you know, we need to have an emergency communication plan. Like if the fire alarm goes off, these 3 people need to know that they need to touch base and make sure that I'm out the door with everyone else. And we helped him think of those things, but he was the person who went to, you know, the Office of Disabilities and like requested those things and took ownership, I guess. And I think he just needed to come to that. Like we were coaching and guiding him, but he needed to figure that out on his own and figure out that when he was asking for support, it wasn't because he was less than or weak. It's just because, well, this is just a matter of fact. In order for, you know, this to be equitable, I need captioning on videos because I'm working 10 times harder than the person sitting next to me. And so he just kind of had to learn those things. But proud mom moment was when he finally took ownership of that and recognized, oh, hey, I can actually do this and be successful. And that this is not something that I need to hide or be ashamed of, I guess.
I think that's such a valuable insight and reminder for us as professionals as well, that a child or student, young adult can be doing really, really well in many domains, right? Like academically, but can still struggle with self-advocacy and self-esteem. And so we have to really look beyond the surface, because I would guess, based on how amazingly your son has done in college and beyond, probably in middle school and high school, he was a good kid doing well academically.
Yes.
But there are these behind the scenes things that we still need to be aware of.
Yes.
And now it's time for our rapid round of questioning. So Elizabeth is going to put our 90-second timer on the screen here for us. And then when so the idea here is that we'll ask a really, quick question. Most of the responses will be maybe, a quick phrase or sentence or two. And we're just going to see how many we can fit in 90 seconds. So are you ready, Dr. Noll?
Yes, I am ready.
Here we go.
Start our timer. Okay. Coffee, tea, or soda?
Coffee, but tea is a close second.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
All-time favorite TV show and why?
I don't know. Skip.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction, but I also enjoy nonfiction. I just am a big reader, so I like it all.
All right. What do you do to unwind or relax?
I love a good bath with a cup of tea or a glass of wine.
What's a secret talent?
My kids think it's cool that I can like whistle with my fingers really loud.
Okay. What motivates you?
Sounds cheesy, but my son. Actually, both of my kids. That's what motivates me.
What is the strangest thing you've ever found in your pocket or purse?
My daughter is very artistic, and she would find those little hanger things that say what size clothes are on the floor at the Target or Walmart. So I would find a purse full of these little plastic S's and M's.
What is your favorite vacation destination?
Any place with the mountains and water.
What is your secret for surviving long, boring meetings?
I think, okay.
Go ahead. You can
Answer.
finish.
We all want to know.
Yes.
Honestly, like I process through writing. And so like writing a lot of notes, but then doodling sometimes when I'm, sometimes I have to let my mind wander a little bit, but taking notes helps me process and not just tune out.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I guess there's only one thing left to say. Way to be, Dr. Noll. And perhaps for someone in our audience, this conversation has sparked the thought that this could be a way for them to be too. So we're wishing you all the absolute best, and we're looking forward to future conversations. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Noll.
Thank you.